With that, let me go ahead and introduce David Dupree, our Political Science Department Chair, April Garcia, our Psychology Department Chair, Tracy Davis, our History Department Chair, and Daniel Vecchio, our Philosophy and Religious Studies Department Chair. And I'm going to try, Daniel, I don't know if you're on here. I'm going to try to butcher your name one more time. Is it Dr. Vecchio or Dr. Vecchio?
It's Vecchio. You got it right the first time.
Yep. Vecchio. Wonderful. All right. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, let me turn it over to your Humanities and Social Sciences Department. How about it, folks?
I think we decided to go alphabetically. So history goes first, and then I'll pass it over to Daniel, and then Dave Dupree, and then April. Hi, everybody. My name is Tracy Davis. I am the chair of the history department here at Victor Valley College. I'm also a community college graduate from Mount San Jacinto College and went to university locally at the University of California, Riverside for my bachelor's and master's degree. I also have a degree in theater as well and teach some theater classes here as well. So what I'd like to do really quick, because there are 4 of us, so I want to make this succinct, is just talk a little bit about what we offer here in history, a few careers that are related to history degrees. And this is a very small list. There's much more you can do with a history degree. And also just a couple of other key facts, such as our enrollment. And if you are looking for a history class, you got to act quickly because our classes are filling up. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that the history department offers both first 8-week, second 8-week, and fully 16-week classes. And the majority of our courses for spring 2021 are online. We do have a couple of remote, which means you would meet like this on Zoom once, twice, 3 times a week. But most of our classes for spring 2021 are online. The second thing to let you know is that in addition to our U.S. History Survey, which is History 117, 118, and our World History Survey, History 103 and 104, the History Department has really embraced a commitment to diversity. And in fact, we're going to be contributing to hopefully some ethnic studies classes and possibly a program. And related to that, we have seen an explosion in our more diverse course offerings. And in fact, we actually are offering 4 sections of Women in U.S. History this spring. 3 either in the first 8 weeks or a 16-week, as well as a brand new one in the second 8 weeks. And these classes fill literally within a couple of days, which is why we added 2 additional sources for sections for spring. The other class that we also have just added a new section to is California History, History 115. We had 2 sections. They filled almost immediately. We have now added a 3rd section, and that one is filling as we speak. California History is really good if you want to be a teacher. It is a required course. So if that's your goal, you may want to try to get into there. Starting spring 2022, we're going to be offering Native American history, which we're really looking forward to, and that is part of our guided pathway. So history is both part of guided pathways, as well as what's sometimes called an AAT or ADT degree, which means that if you go through kind of our guided pathway to get your AAT degree in history, it smooths your transition to the CSU system. We also have a few other agreements with other universities, but CSU is the closest to Victor Valley College. The last thing I just want to say is that what can history do for you? Why should you consider maybe majoring in history, or if you have a double major, maybe one of your majors in history, is not only can you do teaching, right? I teach at the community college level because that's where I learned the most about history and everything else. You can also look into journalism. It would, you just heard Lynn Glickstein talk about the paralegal program. History background is a great thing if you want to become a lawyer, right? You do a lot of history, a lot of precedent as studying for a lawyer. You can also do museum curatorship, become a professional historian, work for the government, such as the National Park Service. And that's just a small list. Politics, if you want to be politics, we have Dave Dupree from political science. A history background is great. So that's my little spiel. I wanted to make it as quick as possible, but I'll be here for any questions after my colleagues go. But I want to turn it over to Daniel Vecchio, who is the chair of the Philosophy and Religious Studies Department.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me on to share a little bit about my programs. I have two, so I'm going to try to do relatively quickly on both so that I don't waste anyone's time. But let me share screen. I did have a little presentation to keep me on track here, so I cover everything I wanted to cover. I hope everyone can see it. And so we have two programs here, Philosophy and Religious Studies at Victor Valley College. And so the first program I want to talk about is the philosophy program. To complete, that would be 18 units, and you would get an AA degree in philosophy, which is transferable. And we have some exciting courses in philosophy, including our intro course, which covers a sort of survey of different topics in philosophy, from metaphysics to ethics to political philosophy, meaning of life, the existence of God. We have Intro to Ethics, which will be offered this spring. So if you're interested, I think there's still a little space. Intro to Logic and Political Philosophy, which is cross-listed with Political Science. We have Philosophy of Religion, in which we delve into questions of God's existence and the nature of God and religious experience. We just developed the Philosophy of Science course, which I hope to be offering within the next couple of semesters. We also have a sort of a historical approach to philosophy with ancient philosophy, modern philosophy, and then we have a critical thinking course, which teaches you to apply logic and critical analysis to your papers and writing. And that leads me really to my next point, a couple of points. Why study it? Well, my first reason for studying philosophy is that I think it's intrinsically fascinating. You get to explore the big questions of life. And so there's a reason, just because I think it's good in itself to study philosophy. It's really part of the college experience to approach these questions and to approach questions in a new way, a new perspective. And what I mean by that is philosophy really teaches you to engage texts critically, to learn to evaluate arguments. And that's something that you can apply across the board in all of your academic endeavors. In fact, I found that once I studied philosophy, my grades in all my other academic disciplines that I was taking as an undergraduate improved. Also, it's fairly well known and documented that GRE and LSAT performances are very high among those who major in philosophy. So that's another, if you're thinking of going on to study, that might be a good reason. Let's see if I can answer those questions too. What can you do with philosophy? Well, you could teach, become a professor. So if you're interested in the academic life of research, that's one pathway. You could become a writer. A lot of writers employ philosophical ideas that they've learned in their academic study to develop interesting angles for their plots. You could become a lawyer. Again, the use of logic and critical reasoning is very important in developing your cases. A social worker, a public administrator. Here's an interesting one. Computer programming and AI research is a growing area that you might want to delve into after you study philosophy, because it deals with questions of consciousness and logic. And there's also philosophical counseling, in which it's not psychological counseling, but it looks at a person's life from a philosophical and existential standpoint. And I have actually a few friends who went into that area after they completed their studies of philosophy. Let me see if this link works here. I hope it does. Who studies philosophy? Here's a short list of some people, fairly well-known people who've studied philosophy. Some are no longer with us, but Pope John Paul II was a Thomistic philosopher. You see Alex Trebek from Jeopardy, who recently passed on. Some Supreme Court justices. comedians like Ricky Gervais, Matt Groening from The Simpsons. Often he employed philosophical ideas in The Simpsons. Writers, novelists, so Steve Martin, Richard Gere, Lana Del Rey. So there are lots of artists and writers who studied philosophy. Let me bring this back up. And now our religious studies program. Oops, here we go. Again, 18 units to complete. This is an AA, it's native to our school. So it's not a transfer degree, but it might be something that you're interested in. We have Intro to Religious Studies. You can focus in both Old and New Testament, religions of the Middle East and West, religions of South and East Asia, religion and society, religion in America, philosophy of religion, which is cross-listed with philosophy and critical thinking. So why study it? Again, I think that this ties into some of what Tracy was talking about with history. It's a multidisciplinary experience where you learn about a little bit about sociology, anthropology, history, philosophy, theology. So you've learned different disciplines, which really can expand your academic horizons. It's also expands your multicultural awareness so that when you're finished with this degree and program, you'll be prepared to enter a diverse workforce, a diverse world in which you will learn, encounter people of different religious backgrounds. And it also gives you a deeper understanding of your own cultural background. What can you do with a religious studies degree? You could be a chaplain, a writer, a religious journalist, a religious leader, minister, pastor, work for nonprofits, or become a religious business manager, and a religious educator or a counselor. So those are some options or paths for you. What are the next steps if either program interests you? You can contact me at, my first name is Daniel and the last name is Vecchio at vvc.edu, and I'd be happy to tell you more about our programs. And I also wanted to invite you, if you're interested and you want to know more about, well, what is philosophy, or what are these religious topics that I might encounter? Here are some interesting podcasts that I thought I'd recommend to any students out there. One is The History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps. You could just Google that and it will give you the whole history of philosophy, both Western philosophy, Indian philosophy, Africana philosophy, and I think they're developing Latin American philosophy. There's Philosophy Bites, Closer to Truth, which is PBS, Unbelievable, which is philosophy and religion, and classical theism. So if you're like, I'm not sure what all this stuff is, check out those podcasts. They'll be fun listening for you. And that's basically my presentation. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm picking up next. I'm Dave Dupree. I'm the chairperson for the Department of Political Science and Paralegal Studies. I also teach full-time in the political science classes. Okay. I think that probably the best way to run through what our courses are like, department programs and job opportunities and that sort of thing, what we study. Let me take you over to our department webpage, which just went into an overhaul this last semester. One of our other full-timers, Dino Bozanelos, had reconstructed this page, did a great job with it. So a couple things to look at is that, how you would come to know us as a Department of Political Science, or some of the individual coursework and things like that. Probably you might know some of our folks in the department. So down here on our department page, we have a faculty section there, and you can see the list of faculty there in alphabetical order, both full-timers and also our adjunct professors as well. So all in political science, and then there's my blurb there. Also Lynn Glickstein, who you just heard from if you're in the previous half-hour segment, with the law program, paralegal program, which is attached to our department. And then a number of law professors, a number of poli-sci professors. And then we also have last but not least, Julia Wint, so she's connected to our department in two ways. She teaches, obviously her full-time responsibility you're going to hear about coming up in the next segment at 2:30, but also she teaches part-time for us in a number of classes in political science. And then she assists us with the Cooperative Edge program that we have built into our program of poli-sci, helping to find internship type positions for students. If students already have government or jobs in local government in particular, along those lines, then she can work with you and your employer to get college credit in that area there. So if we were back to the old, in person, these are the kind of people you would see walking around the lake and, in the student center, et cetera. So that's one way you could come to know us. The other way, of course, would be our courses that you would be taking. So we've got a courses page here, list of classes you can look at. And, it just goes with every department. If by chance you're going to be taking a class in that department, it's usually one class. And then your other department is you're going to be your majors and things like that. So the common class that students take, whether they're majors or minors, certificate, degree program people in poli-sci and international studies, but a general student is going to be poli-sci 102. So that's how most students are actually come to know us, because the Introduction to American Government and Politics class is not only a kind of a feeder class into other classes we have in the discipline, but for students that kind of start and stop with that class, it's probably fulfilling a requirement at their associate degree level, which one of those main requirements is what we call the American Institution requirements. And so to get your AAS degree, most of those require that you've got to take a collection of classes. I think there's only like 6 of them that you can pick from, and poli-sci 102 is one of those. If you're transferring to a CSU school, they have what they call a Constitution and American Ideals, U.S. History, Constitution, American Ideals requirement. And Political Science 102 is actually a required course along with U.S. History for most bachelor's and bachelor's degree type programs. So that's how you would certainly come to know us. But, broader than that is that before you came to us, just your everyday experience, think about how you interacted with government in some way. And you don't have to go very far through your day to think about how that can happen. Not only just once you in the household, but also when you pull out of your driveway and when you go to school, or even if it's virtual here at home, is that you're really interacting, whether you see it or not, is that's local government. Victor Valley College Community College District is a local government with an elected board of trustees. Okay, and then certainly, when as a student, if you're on the Pell Grant or the Cal Grant, getting that kind of assistance, those are federal and state programs, grant programs available through the funded by the budget there. When you're working, you get a paycheck and you look at your deductions. A lot of those deductions are based upon, they're being taken from your check from either state government or the federal government in form of Social Security, taxes, or unemployment insurance, things along those lines. Your paycheck is also be determined by what the minimum wage set up is for the state or the federal government. And you don't want to look at the kind of the downside of things, but when you're going down I-15 or Main Street Hesperia and see the red lights and sirens, you're kind of hoping that that's an ambulance or a fire truck and you pull over and you're all good. But if it's a police officer, you're hoping that they do pass by. But of course, that's government too, and law enforcement in general is government. Parks around the city, but just as you go back home, you pull in your driveway, think, gosh, I want to build a fence. And there's usually a city ordinance that says, yeah, you can build one, but you have to have a permit, you have to pay a fee for that, you got to get the plans approved and things along those lines. And gosh, if you want to open up a business, you're going to have to deal with government. So that's how you would come to know government. We deal with it in more, not just a traditional sense, because those things that we just mentioned are going to come up and you're going to learn about them. Okay, but let me go to one course that really summarizes our entire discipline in comparison to the other courses here. This Introduction to Political Science is that, well, in poli-sci, what would I end up studying besides American government, which you just talked about? Well, in the introduction class, not that you necessarily have to take it, first in order to get into poli-sci 102. It certainly works well with each other there, but it gives us the broadest spectrum of what we study in political science. So we study things like political ideologies and movements. Professor Vecchio was talking about political philosophy, and so we look at conservatism and liberalism, communism, libertarianism. We end up looking at a lot of the isms, including the economic philosophies as well. When we look at participation, that's us. Okay, so if we're not elected or we're not part of government, how do we participate with government? You know, in the form of, well, voting and elections, certainly we know that. So one of the things that's going to come up, particularly in your American government class, is what about that electoral college and how does that thing go? Okay, so we'll study that certainly. But we also look at interest groups and political parties and the media. As I already mentioned, elections and votings. That's how we can participate and make demands and our will known to government is through that participation. We get inside the box of government and look at the three branches, three levels in our system, but you know, like legislative, executive, judicial, and national, state, and local. And so, but that's our system. So we'll look at other, you know, some of other classes like comparative government. We'll look at how other governments structure themselves, and that there may not be so much of a separation of powers. It may be more unified into basically a single branch of government, for example. And then our classes look at just taking different looks depending upon the class on political issues and public policy. So that would be things like domestic policy and economic policy, foreign policy, how nations relate with each other in terms of diplomacy and trade and even military policy in that regard. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a sampling in terms of what we study. If you want to look for a real detailed list of, well, what can I do with a degree or certificate or coursework in political science, you can look at this page, the careers in political science and these other areas here, and it's really broken down in terms of, well, what can I go into? And then also, you know, what are some of the degrees required? But if you go back to our homepage, and in the catalog in particular as well, we have this thing here. It's just real short, real straightforward. And when you look through this list, it's basically maybe working in government, maybe working in the private sector, maybe also for nonprofits and things and interest groups, things along those lines. And it's, you know, I'm just list off a couple of people that were graduates of Victor Valley College that were in the political science program that went on, and what kind of jobs did they land? We've got members or a person that became elected member of Congress for a number of terms. He's up north, former ASB president at Victor Valley College. A great number of teachers in teaching in both history and government classes in high schools and things along those lines, working in government staff position, working on congressional staff positions, and also one, don't know if he's still with them, but was working in a UN organization, the United Nations organization. So that kind of gives you an idea where you can go with this thing. Of course, it's dependent upon certain jobs are going to require certain certification, thing along those lines. But hopefully by having these folks that you're seeing in this segment, this 30-minute segment, and the one that came before us and the one that will come after us, there's that you see how our disciplines tie together. And that's one of the things we really try to push on, is that when you look at our degrees, we borrow courses from other departments and other disciplines. And we, not because we have any shortage of our own classes, but we're looking for students, we're looking to help broaden the students' experience here through our programs. Okay, I think I want to wrap it up there so I can turn it over to our next person, April Garcia in psychology.
Thanks, Dave. I'm April Garcia. I'm a full-time instructor here at Victor Valley College. I'm also the department chair of the psychology department. And like the other presenters here today from the social sciences department or division, I wanted to share with you the coursework that we offer here at VVC, a list of skills that we expect our psychology students to develop, and then maybe if we have some time to look at a couple of job announcements that I found in the last week that would be a good fit for somebody that has an AA in psychology from VVC. So I'm going to share with you my screen, and I'm feeling a little rusty, you guys. So let's see here. Here we go. Okay, so here is the awesome catalog that's available online at VVC. And I'm sharing with you the psychology AAT page, and it describes what the AAT degree is in psychology. As other presenters noted, the AAT helps you transfer easily to a Cal State. So we have designed our own program to meet the needs of a Cal State transfer, of course. The courses that we offer are linked below, which I think is great, which is why I'm trying to show you this page. I'm going to link it to you guys in the chat as well. But our Intro to Psych class is not only a GE, but it's a requirement for the major. And you can see here by clicking on the link that we can see the description of the course. It's a survey course, and so we cover many, many topics in the 16 weeks or the 8 weeks, whatever you decide to register for. But psychology is the scientific study of mental processes and behavior. So what we're looking at is not just why people do what they do, but what is all of the research that supports the science of psychology. And when I say that, what I'm trying to allude to is the next two courses that are required in the major: statistics, which I teach, and psych methods 217, which I also teach. So psychology is more than just figuring out why people do, but we have to set up these very careful studies, collect the data, analyze the data, so that we can figure out what are some truths about human behavior. So I'll leave this, I'll send this up in the chat so that you can look at this for yourself. We do offer the AAT degree as well as a applied developmental psychology certificate, which we designed for students that may want to seek some jobs in classroom settings. I come from a background where I was a behavior therapist. And so with that in mind, we were trying to help students develop a pathway to apply for jobs like that. So we want you to take your intro to psych, developmental psych, and there are a couple of other classes here that are listed on the certificate, with the goal of getting you into that first step, so being a behavior therapist. Next, I want to share with you the skills that we hope the psychology major will leave with. And this is from the American Psychological Association. I'll also share the link where I got this with you. But we hope that our students develop cognitive skills. You can see we want them to have analytical thinking, critical thinking, be able to be creative, manage information, and exercise good judgment and decision making. We also want our students to be able to communicate with other people. It's really important if you're trying to influence their behavior, right? So we want you to not only communicate orally, but also written. And we have some personal skills. You need to be adaptable, have integrity and self-regulation. There's social skills here, like collaborating with others, being inclusive, demonstrating leadership, and being able to make management decisions, being service-oriented. And you have to have those technological skills too. As you're aware, now that we're all online, you have to be able to download, install software, be able to get on Zoom, figure out how your software and hardware works, and be adaptable to changes, right? So we hope that our students get those technological skills as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to, pardon me, the couple of job announcements that I found on Indeed last week. All I did was type in a couple of keywords like psychology. Psychology is, the easiest word to type in a job search. And this is a job that you could qualify for if you took a few classes in psychology, maybe even graduated with your AA. And this is one of the paths that I took in my past, becoming an ABA behavior interventionist, so behavior therapist. The pay is listed. It's pretty good pay. It is part-time work. And usually these are after school hours because you're generally working with children in their home after school hours. And probably things are different now that we're all online. But I'm just scrolling through the job announcement here. And what they want you to do is, I'm just highlighting a couple things. Must have good leadership skills. Remember, that was on that list that I just showed you. Ability to communicate effectively, orally and in writing. Again, one of those skills that we want our graduates to have. You have to have professional development opportunity. You'll have professional development opportunities to become a qualified behavior tech. So that means you'll receive on-the-job training as well. Then your educational background can be in anything, but they like psychology, right? So you could have any kind of major, but if you demonstrate the skills that they listed in this job announcement, they would be happy to talk to you. How do I know that? Because I used to hire behavior therapists myself. I'm going to share one more with you because it's timely. There's another job announcement here, contact tracer. Oops. And I found that also on and I'm just going to share my screen really fast with you again. The Indeed. So this one, You'll need to be able to show empathy, college degree or equivalent required, communication skills, critical thinking, sound judgment. Again, you could see that those were the skills that were on that prior document that I shared with you. So I know that I went through that quickly, but I know that we need to go over to our next panelist as well. So I want to be respectful of their time.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, April. Those are some great postings. Now, how often? Well, let me take this back. Of course, the degree is going to be applicable to all kinds of different things. And you did that search. What sorts of things would you recommend for those that have, and hopefully you can generalize it as an associate in humanities, when they're searching for work, what would you recommend be some highlights they seek out that might help them excel with that AA? Like, is there any keywords or anything very specific or industries that they should be looking at?
Yeah, research. Sure, yeah, the word research, the word data analysis. You're going to do data analysis when you take a stats class. You know, critical thinking even. So Dr. Vecchio could probably say critical thinking would come up in lots of jobs. And I think Professor Davis also mentioned that. So critical thinking, you're going to develop that in all of your social sciences, and job providers want those skills, right? So critical thinking, don't underestimate that phrase.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if I'm not mistaken, all of the degree or all of the certificates and the associates that we discussed, all of those would be wonderful for transfer students that are looking to transfer to a UC or Cal State, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. And then the last